Black Eyed Kids story time. This story actually happened 5 years ago. We're gonna call the person from the story Kyle. So on a cold winter night in mid-February, Kyle had gone out to go grab some fast food. His mom used to live in a gated community at the time, so when he went to swipe his card in order to get the gate to open, he noticed this attractive girl walking in the sidewalk. Kyle slowed down to get a better look at her, and if he remembers correctly, she was wearing jeans and a hoodie. When he does this, it was almost like the girl was excited that he had slowed down and that she had caught his attention. She turns around and starts walking towards Kyle's truck. When she's about 5 feet away from him, he notices her jet black eyes and the feeling of terror that just swept through his body. He ends up hitting the gas and just floors it. Thankfully, at this point, the gate had already opened. To this day, he tries to come up with a rational reason of what he witnessed. Maybe somebody was wearing contacts or playing a prank on him. But what he can't explain is the irrational fear and just pure horror that he felt when he came in close contact with her. He's just thankful that he got away before she was able to talk her way into his car.
You ever heard of black-eyed children, those little demon creatures? Well, they stalked me. This is such a wild story, but I absolutely have to tell it. So some years back, I was living in a really unique living situation. I was living in a national park. It only had room for the caretaker, but it was a duplex, so he ended up turning it into a rental unit. And I moved into there with my son. This decommissioned lighthouse was part of this national park, and it was right there on like a cliff peninsula in San Diego, right on the San Diego Bay. And so while you're like right there in the bay, you're still pretty isolated out there. And it was a very creepy location, not least of all because you have to drive through an extensive military cemetery to get there. But basically the park, like any national park, closes at sunset, but this especially closed at 5, and after that I would have to get in through a really rusty gate. I think it was pretty corroded because of the sea air. There wasn't much to be done about it, but it did make it a security concern when I would come home late at night and my little clicker wouldn't work. I used to MC karaoke, and so it wasn't unusual for me to get home at like 12:30, 1 a.m. I was already anxious to get home that night, but then of course, the gate was not working, and I kept clicking it because boy, did I not want to get out that night. I was like, open up, you rusty bitch, but it never did, and so I knew that was it. I was gonna have to get out and do it manually. And I'm kind of bathing the whole thing in my headlights so that I can see the pin pad because I'm old and my eyes aren't working like they used to. So as I'm trying to figure it out, I hear this odd little voice say, "Ma'am, can you help us?" And I say odd because not only was it a child's voice, but it was kind of robotic, devoid of personality. Already so caught off guard. I mean, this was so unusual. We were way up there on a cliff. There is no way some kid could have just come gallivanting up. And it was hours after closing, so they couldn't have been left there by their parents. Just none of it. So as I'm looking around trying to identify where this voice came from, I start hearing the rustling in the leaves. And this voice says again, "Can you help us?" And I'm like, us? Like one wasn't enough. So I identify where it's coming from. I look, and there are indeed 2 little freaking kids wearing hoodies, and even weirder, they're wearing sunglasses. Dude, it's like 12:30 at night, right? I was like, "Where are your parents?" They ignored me and said, "Let us in," at the same time. I said, "Let you in where?" And she hisses, "Anywhere." Now, before you say anything, I do have a maternal instinct. I do have a child of my own. And at any other point in my life, or even that day, I would have been happy to try and find their parents. But when I tell you that something about them was so off that I felt genuinely frightened. They were affectless, like robots, like automatons, just kind of standing there droning on. I was at a loss, and I was kind of in a whole fight or flight situation. And To my great relief, suddenly some headlights started bouncing up the hill behind me, which was very, very odd. No one lived up there except for me and the old caretaker, but I did not care. I was just so happy for the distraction. But wildly enough, while they had been rustling on the way in, they didn't make a noise on the way out, because when I looked around, they were completely gone. So I get home and I call the cops just in case some strange little children had been left there. But they never found anybody. Now, I do wish this was the end of my story, but it is certainly not. They became a plague for me and my son, and with them came pestilence and nightmares, and we feared for our life. There is a whole story about these black-eyed children.
So I've made a video about my experience with the black-eyed children in the past, but it was forever ago, back when Jesus was a boy, so I'll just tell you again. I was working in an apartment building in downtown Orlando, and it was a very nasty weather day. We had a hurricane rolling through, and I heard a knock on the office door. I was just watching YouTube videos on my phone. I was just watching Trisha Paytas, if that's what I was watching. And I heard a knock on the office door, and my first thought was, like, why are you out here in this tropical disaster? My second thought was, read the sign, babe. Are we within office hours? Just come on in, don't knock. So I looked out the window because I was nosy. I want to see who I'm talking to before I have to talk to him, because I don't like to talk to anybody for real. It was two kids and they were looking down, and I was like, oh, I'm like, oh, like, what's going on? And so I go over there and I open the door and I'm like, hey, where are your parents? Like, when they looked up at me, their eyes were all black, like black as this right here. And there was no surface to them. It was just two black holes that looked like they went on forever. When I made eye contact with them, or, you know, the lack thereof, the terror and the fear started right here and worked its way down my whole body. And I felt like something that was not supposed to be there was like running its hands down the back of my spine. I don't know how to explain that. Do with that what you will, but that's how I felt. And I'm very spiritual and I'm very well protected. So immediately I knew something was wrong, and I'm educated on what they are, so I fortunately knew exactly what I was dealing with when I was dealing with it. So I immediately closed the door. I closed the office. I called someone who I trust. I called my boss. I was like, hey, pull the cameras. Like, you need to come see this shit. Nothing ever came of it. I never got sick. Nothing terrible ever happened to me. Like I said, I'm very spiritual and very well protected. This stuff is real, and y'all, just because you don't understand it don't mean it don't exist. I'm telling you right now, you need to respect the fact that this shit might exist, because it does. Don't tamper with it. Don't go looking for it. But if you're faced with it, know what to do. But that's my story. It was wild. I hope I never have that experience again. It was not very fun. I did not enjoy it at all. But it's a story I'll always have to tell. And you can believe me or not, I don't really care. I know what I saw. I know what I saw.
Story time of the time that I encountered a black-eyed child. If this is the type of content that you're into, feel free to follow along. I post a scary story every single day. And for reference, I did share the story a while back when I had like 2 followers. I figured I would go ahead and reshare it now. This happened when I lived in Georgia. It was late at night. I was up watching a movie when I heard somebody knocking on my door. For whatever reason, my gut instinct told me not to open it. 1, it's creepy for anyone to be coming to my door so late at night. But 2, I just had this gut-wrenching feeling that something was off. I ended up getting up from the couch and I got near the door trying to figure out who was out there. And before I could even open my mouth, the person standing behind the door knew I was standing there and said, "Hi ma'am, I'm just here selling some magazine subscriptions. Can you please let me in?" I was a bit startled at first because how would he even know that I was standing there? I was definitely quiet. So I kind of peeked through the peephole and I saw that it was like a boy about to be maybe 12, 13 years old. He was wearing a hoodie. He was just kind of standing there. I decided to ignore him. He continued to knock on my door and start saying, "Please ma'am, if you would just let me borrow a corner of your table so we can talk about these magazine subscriptions." And I'm just like, no. And he's just knocking and knocking and knocking until he gives up. He turns around and he goes right across where my neighbor lives. I hear when he knocks on her door and she opens it. The minute she opens the door, I hear the boy say whatever it was he was gonna say to her, and all I hear is her scream, say, "Honey," like calling to like her husband, and then she just slams the door shut. Right after that, it was complete silent. I didn't hear anything else. The next morning at like 7 a.m., my neighbor came knocking on my door. I looked out and I saw that it was her, so I opened it and she was freaked out. And she begins to ask me if a boy had been at my door the night before. So I explained to her and I said, yes, somebody knocked on my door and I saw when he knocked on your door. She then goes to tell me that when she opened the door and he started to talk to her, she saw that his eyes were completely blacked out. Like even the white parts were completely blacked out. And she got this gut-wrenching feeling that her first instinct was to yell for her husband, and she slammed the door shut. That was one of the first times that I had ever even heard about the black-eyed kids. And once I did more research, I found out what happens if you open the door. So black-eyed kids bring death. They bring chaos. They bring sickness. They bring loss of money, loss of income, loss of job. They just bring the worst of the worst. Thankfully, she did not allow him into the house, but she did answer the door. So unfortunately, it cost her marriage. Like her and her husband ended up breaking up. It was a horrible divorce. She lost everything. Like everything just horrible. So word of advice, if you ever hear a knock at the door, don't answer it.
Texas, the first ever documented black-eyed kid encounter in 1996. Children are creepy in any context, true. So any urban legend including black-eyed children is bound to turn some heads. In the late 90s, a journalist named Brian Bethel was working in his town of Abilene, Texas, when he encountered something that he'll remember until his last day. He was parked outside a movie theater when two children knocked on his window. For reasons he couldn't understand, he was completely gripped with fear. He rolled down the window and the kids asked for a ride back to their house so they can get cash for the movie. His fear made him hesitate, but the kids were persistent. They kept saying weird things like they weren't armed or anything. Once Bethel looked back at the kids, he was terrified to see their eyes had turned pitch black. They started screaming at him that they could only come in the car if he invited them in. And he quickly drove away. Smart. As a journalist, he spread the word and was surprised when other people wrote back saying they had experienced something similar. No thanks.
Y'all gonna think I'm fucking crazy. I'm walking down the street, walking back from the store. There's this guy probably about 15 feet behind me. And you know how you can tell someone's walking behind you? I look back, and he's just fucking looking at me. He stops when I stop. So I walk forward a little bit. You know, I keep walking like that. And I said, fuck this shit, man. I turn around and go, what? What's your fucking problem? I swear to God, on my mother's grave, this guy's eyes was jet fucking black. Jet fucking black. Just sit there smiling like that, man. I fucking turned around, I fucking ran. I said, fuck this shit, dude. Fuck this shit. I come home. I'm sitting out there where my street is. Like that fucking corner right there by that stop sign, that motherfucker was standing right fucking there, dude. Come in here, get my gun, look out again. He's gone. That dude was not fucking human.
I know I look crazy, but not crazier than what I'm about to say. Those TikToks of people talking about they seen people with black eyes. One lady saw that black-eyed man in the grocery store, and then another man I just saw said that he saw somebody walking behind him with black eyes. I've encountered the same type of experience, not once, but multiple times. Before I even go into the detail in the story, that I want y'all to know that these are demons, and demons do possess people, period. Y'all know I used to work as a spicy dancer, and I was in a club one time. It's normal to have creepy guys kind of follow you around because they want to dance or want to buy you a drink or, you know, whatever. I'm not thinking too much of it, but after seeing this dude kind of creepily follow me around, I finally sit down with him at the bar, and we're having a drink, and we're talking, and I noticed he was doing a constant like sign on my leg. Like he did it like 3 or 4 times. And even though at the time I wasn't spiritually that sensitive because I was doing so wrong, I'm like, what are you doing? My discernment went off, and it wasn't even strong then. And I basically was like, he's trying to curse me. And I tell y'all, I looked him dead in his face and I said, the blood of Jesus. When I tell you, his eyes went pitch black. Now I'm not talking about no, I thought I saw it. No, eyes went pitch black. He pulled his shirt down and he had literally a Satanist tattoo right on his chest. I got so scared I knocked my drink over, and I kind of held my composure, but when I tell you I was shaking, he laughed and I got up and I walked away. Demons are real. They are out here. They will try to target you. They will try to scare you. People don't believe you when you say you see these things, but these things are real. I want y'all to know this. The spiritual realm is more gangster than the physical, okay? And once you realize that, you will never ever think it's a hallucination or you just heard something. Time is dwindling down into the rapture and God not playing. So seeing these things daily is going to start happening, because that thin line between the physical realm and the spiritual realm is thinning out like super much. So y'all just stay prayed up for real. I love y'all, and so does Jesus.
As an experiment, he set up his laptop camera to record overnight while continuously playing this low-frequency tone, in hopes that he would actually lure a black-eyed child to his door and catch the incident on camera. On the first night, his laptop camera recorded nothing. On the second night, something activated his motion-sensitive outdoor light, but again, there was nothing on camera. Night 3, nothing. Night 4, still nothing appeared. But then, very late on night 5, something shocking happened. Someone appears on the front porch, standing and staring inside the house for over an hour.
Look at that. That is crazy. How long was it out? Man, this is like an hour. It was out there for over an hour.
As the strange visitor left, the investigator claims that he was awoken by the sound of movement outside and got up to check.
Hello? Hello?
There was no one there, but the gate to the house had been left open. Eerily enough, the man lives in a secluded area, only accessible via a long unpaved road through the woods, so any visitor at any time would be uncommon. But he says that this visitor was absolutely terrifying.
Let me start by saying that my husband and his family are big time into hunting deer mostly. They hunt a lot of different areas around where we live due to knowing a lot of people, etc. One evening, my brother-in-law was hunting an area that he did frequently and was actually walking back to his truck from being done hunting. It was barely after dark, the time of night where the sun is gone but you can still see just fine outside. He was walking across a pretty open field when he just felt that he wasn't alone. Not like there was an animal or anything, but that he wasn't the only being in that field. He obviously turns around, and about 50 or 60 yards behind him, he sees a kid.
Nope.
A little boy, roughly about 8 or 9 years old. The kid is just standing there, not moving at all, but doesn't look hurt or in distress or anything like that. He actually looked extremely calm. He appeared out of absolutely nowhere. How does a kid just appear in the middle of a field over a mile off of a country road back by the damn woods? He doesn't.
Period.
He was wearing normal clothes and had black hair, but since he was so far away from him, he couldn't make out any of this kid's facial features. My brother-in-law obviously is taken back by seeing another person, much less a kid that clearly wasn't hunting or had any business being back there. No one within any sort of close distance to that property had kids that age or anything. So my brother-in-law yells back at him, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" But the little boy did not say anything at all. My brother-in-law kind of shrugs it off and just keeps walking, assuming he has to belong to someone living nearby, right? He was picking up the pace a bit when he stops and turns around to realize that this little boy is only walking when he starts to freaking walk.
No.
Then also stopping when he stops to turn around and look at him. He yells back at the kid again and says, "Hey, who are you? Are you lost? Do you need help?" But again, the kid says nothing. He just stares at him creepily. This is the point where my brother-in-law thinks, nope, fuck this.
Literally.
And takes off sprinting to his truck, throws his stuff in there, and takes off back home. My now husband, but then just boyfriend, was still living at his parents' house during this time. So he was home when his younger brother showed up, freaking the hell out and told everyone the story. My husband, being scared of literally nothing, I don't know, was like, okay, then somebody needs to go around and see if anyone is missing a kid. My brother-in-law explained he did not think this was just some ordinary kid that was taking a walk and got lost. He explained how off the whole thing felt. Obviously, that's why he sprinted over a mile back to his truck, carrying all his heavy-ass hunting gear. But then, of course, my husband leaves and goes around to all the neighbors. But of course, no one at all was missing or looking for a young boy. Again, we live in a very rural area, so it's not like there was a known missing child that just wandered into the woods or anything like that. My husband then went back to the area his brother was hunting, and of course, no kid. This kid was just gone. To this day, no one can explain who the kid was, how he just magically popped up in the middle of the field, or why he wouldn't speak or even react to my brother-in-law speaking to him. Of course, when I heard this story, I always assumed he was some sort of ghost, until I listened to your episode on Black-Eyed Kids, and immediately thought, oh my God, that's what was in the field with him that day.
Yep.
Anyway, I hope this scared the shit out of you and it makes a creepy account cut. Love you, ladies. Keep making the best podcast ever.